Bertha. Dr. Burns coming right back.
Yes, he's going to call Todd Hickwell to see if he remembers.
Oh, okay.
And of course, we changed the date for Todd because he was going to be on a Boy Scout outing. But
No,
Todd
Todd
said
is.
he saw him today.
Todd is okay.
Todd is, yeah,
on the internet. All right. We probably should go ahead and get started.
He was real excited about presenting, so I think he must have just... Yeah, we can get started.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Well, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our community forum. Can you hear me all right? Is this coming across? Things have a tendency to reverberate in this room. Everybody hearing me in the back? Higher. I've got a little height problem here. How's that? My name's Garth Christensen. I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's forum. And we want to thank each and every one of you for attending tonight. We have a forum entitled Building a Safer Community Together. And like many of you, I live and work in Hudson. I have 2 children who are in the Hudson School District, so I'm a parent of kids. And also, like many of you, I'm painstakingly aware of recent events that have taken place across our country in towns such as Littleton, Colorado. I didn't look up the current events, but I can also recall in the last couple years places like Kentucky and Arkansas and California and Georgia recently, where similar very drastic events have taken place that have kind of caused us all, I think, as parents and young people to question what's happening. What we want to do tonight is really we've assembled a panel of experts who we think have encompassed a number of the important aspects that go into what's happening in our culture now. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that there's something drastically different that's going on with youth and parents and the type of culture and society that we live in. I mean, I listed a few that could be factors that may speak to the expertise of our panel. We've all seen violent media, violent movies, violent television programs. The internet is a cause of concern, the lack of quality family time, alcohol and drug issues, and the issues of a place for spirituality in all of our lives as both parents and young people. So with this distinguished panel, we hope to open up a dialogue to at least begin to make an effort to identify some issues and hopefully provide some answers and open up the discussion to see what we can do to become all better proactive participants in this process to bring about hopefully some positive change for our young people. You know, one of my other duties as a moderator is to talk a little bit about a group called Community Action. Community Action is our sponsor tonight, and I guess I would just ask, how many people have heard of the group in Hudson called Community Action? Or, yeah, we're probably preaching to the choir here, so to speak, but Community Action has a long history in Hudson. Many of the people that you see up here on the panel have been involved with it. We have several board members here tonight. It started, I believe, in the early 1980s as a drug and alcohol prevention and family resource type of agency to help with those issues. And more recently now, here in the latter 90s, the scope of that group has broadened to encompass youth issues. And many of the projects that the Community Action Group is working on, I think, impact very directly on some of the questions that we have tonight. For example, now there's a program Community Action has where there is an ongoing effort to develop a teen center where kids can have a safe place to go and get involved in activities that they would enjoy, to rub shoulders with each other, and more importantly, to be mentored by adults. That's together with the effort that's gone on that you can see for a wheel park that we have in town now behind the YMCA, so kids can have the same kind of opportunities. There's talk to put a family resource center in that teen center, and so a number of good things are happening. Other things quickly that the group's working on are child-centered coaching, where we work with adults to teach them how not to teach kids how to play basketball or play football or play hockey, but how to mentor to young people, how to hear what young people's issues are and how to help them in the context of the sport they're playing, maybe solve larger problems. So we have a number of good things that are happening in Hudson, and I think that the school district is the same. They've taken a number of proactive measures. So while at the same time that we're quite happy about what's going on in our community, we hear those words echoing that I've heard on the news accounts, and I've said it before in other public settings, but it just rings so true when you see Littleton and you see parents and you see administrators saying, not in our community. This doesn't happen in our community. And I think this forum is emblematic of the fact that we're taking a proactive approach to hopefully making sure nothing like that ever happens. I'm supposed to also mention there is a book display over here for people to avail themselves of those resources. They're not for sale tonight, but you certainly can get some ideas about resources and materials. Also, Kurt Larson, who many of you may know, was kind enough to come up to me a few minutes before the meeting and mention that he has had an ongoing parent group meeting for the last 8 years, a parent support group, and he left some materials on the counter over there, and he gave me one of them, which I seem to have misplaced momentarily. And the name of that group is Parents Who Care. They have weekly meetings every Monday night from 6:30 to 8:30 at the First Presbyterian Church, which offers them a place to meet but is not a sponsor in terms of any formal way as a church. So you may wish to avail yourself of that. Also, we'd like anybody who would be interested in becoming involved in community action to sign a sign-up sheet as it goes around. And so now, let me, without further delay, then talk about our format tonight. You see some of our panelists assembled here. We're going to have 10 minutes or so for each one of them to make a presentation tonight. We may pass the microphone around or have them come to the podium. We'd like you, as they're making their remarks, to please jot down questions. Think about what comments you'd like to make in regard to their remarks, so that at the end, when we have our discussion, that you can bring those points up. We want to give everybody equal time, and then at the end we'll all have a group discussion that we can ask speakers to address your particular questions. We're going to try and get through this thing and be done by 9 o'clock. I'm pretty sure we can accomplish that. And so with your patience, I think we will go ahead and begin the format. Let me begin by introducing our first topic, as I have it listed here, which is what parents can do to help their children survive and thrive. We have two distinguished speakers with us tonight, and I think Paul Larson gets the dubious distinction or positive distinction of going first. I know that Paul was asked recently to do this on short notice, and so we really appreciate his being able to be with here. Paul has been with the police department for 26 years, most recently for the last 5 years as a detective, working a great deal with juveniles. Without further ado, let's hear from Paul. Sure.
No, that's okay. You can.
You want to bring it through the middle?
I just don't like standing behind the podiums. Just a little bit more about me. I grew up and I was raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Graduated way back in 1965. Coming from a big city, there wasn't crime like we talk about now. I grew up in a no-drug culture. I mean, drugs weren't a problem back then like they are now. I could ride my bike down to any city in Milwaukee street. My parents didn't worry about me. They felt extremely comfortable. Times have changed, and we see that just even here in Hudson. Now, Hudson is a safe community. I came here way back in 1973. Age of majority was going on, the drinking age. We had 18 Wisconsin and 21 across the river, and everybody came over here and got drunk, and we chased open containers and alcohol all over the place, and it really tore Hudson apart a lot. That's a little bit in regards to history. Hudson really is a safe community. And if we want to talk about the nuts and bolts, that's what's happening. We don't get very much violent crime. It just really doesn't occur in Hudson. And when we want to talk about this community, we have to throw in that a lot of our people live out in the county. They live in the townships, and they also live in North Hudson. And we have to realize that even although Hudson's maybe about 7,000, we've got 3,500 up in North Hudson, and probably in these 3 townships over here that all feed into the Hudson School District, we're looking at a community probably around the range of 15,000, which is the biggest percentage of St. Croix County. What we see at the police department, and when you talk about the nuts and bolts, is property crime. That's the one thing that we see. We also see it on the high school level. We spend more time with property crime and kids stealing from kids. And that's basically what we're seeing. When I started as a detective, very seldom did we run through credit card frauds or check forgeries. And that has exploded with our youth. And I'm talking 16 up to 22 years of age. Youth will steal from parents' friends. They'll get checkbooks or credit cards. That's the kind of property crime that we're seeing. Here in this school, there's a program that we started along with the school, a school liaison officer. It's a very good program, and it's working out because of the fact that you realize what's happening here in the high school is this is a small community. You've got close to 1,500 people coming here and spending their time. And you're seeing a small part of society that's happening here. We have locker room thefts up here and a lot of property crime. That's what we see in Hudson. That's what's really happening. In regards to safety issues, this community does a real good job on safety issues. We don't have home invasions or people breaking into homes. Most of our property crime out there on the street is people breaking into cars, stealing stereos and CDs. That's what we get a lot, and we don't sell very many of them, to be very honest with you. It's a kind of a nighttime deal, but it's been a plague in this town. In regards to safety, we get into the schools, and this community is really good because the parents are good. I see a lot of good parents. I've been in contact with a lot of them. You know, kids do make mistakes, and we have to let our kids grow up. And along with growing up, they make their mistakes. One thing I see, and I've kind of really changed 180 degrees because I was a patrol officer and then I was the night patrol sergeant. And then when I became the juvenile sergeant, I got into court. I kind of didn't buy in at first the idea that the parents really had any control. A lot of it, I thought at times, was the kids were just making bad decisions, and these are the kids' faults. Until I started sitting in municipal court. That was with Judge Dills and then with Judge Garrity. And I kind of came 180 degrees. And I saw kids acting the way they were doing was because of the way their parents were acting. And it's a hard thing to put a finger on, but it's an anti-society, anti-establishment, anti-authority type of opinions and philosophies. The parents would make the excuses in municipal court for the child. The child didn't have to speak. The child didn't have to say what their problems were. The parents would speak for them. I began to kind of really pay attention to that. When kids make mistakes and the parents make sure that their child or their children follow and stand up for their mistakes, we never see those kids a second or third time. It's only the kids that constantly keep coming back that seem to have a problem with parents. It's kind of putting an onus on the parents, but that is a small portion. It's a small portion that probably does a lot of our crime. When we do run across kids and we do break a case, we find multiple violations. So there is a small percentage that's doing basically the majority of problems out there.
Thank you very much, Paul. Our second presenter in this topic is our municipal court judge, Sue Garrity. And Sue's been in her position since 1996. She was also very adamant in having me mention that she's a parent, and that probably comes before being a judge in her mind, and she'd like to speak to some issues regarding this topic. Please welcome Sue.
I hope that works. Everybody's going to be at their own comfort level, and obviously a podium is a little closer to mine. Good evening. Thank you, first of all, Community Action, for the opportunity to address this important topic tonight with the dedicated community leaders that we have here. My comfort level is not with microphones, though. The topic that was given to me was, how can we help our children survive in the 21st century? How do we return our schools to the safe harbors that they used to be? How can students survive, or better yet, thrive in an educational environment again? We need a sincere commitment from all aspects of our community if we truly desire to aid our young people today. My focus tonight is on how to help students who find themselves in trouble with the law, but I hope that the suggestions that I give can be applicable to all students. Last year, Hudson Municipal Court had 273 juvenile citations issued. That does not include traffic citations, but covers underage drinking, shoplifting, disorderly conduct, curfew violations, smoking, and truancy. The high number, I believe, is a result of increased law enforcement, which I strongly applaud and thank the Hudson Police Department for. But my experience is that the frequency of younger students in municipal court is also rapidly increasing. As Sergeant Larson mentioned, the majority of these teens are one-time offenders who have made a mistake. Unfortunately, they are either slow to recognize that or slow to admit it, and even slower to make an apology for it. Rarely will an offender make a sincere apology in court. Those who do typically do not violate again. Usually contrite students appear with both parents. They're ashamed to be there, and they wonder how their parents are ever going to trust them again. Those are the fortunate students that I see. 30 or 40 years ago, we knew everybody in our community. Because of that, we were all more accountable, but particularly young people. Our parents made us apologize to the neighbor whose flowers we trampled, or window we broke, or whom we were disrespectful to. Any adult observing inappropriate behavior would immediately report us to our parents. Today, teenagers are anonymous. We don't know them. We don't make them apologize. We don't report what we have observed to their parents. We, too, try to be anonymous. Now, that doesn't mean that we failed as parents. Even God had a problem with Adam and Eve. The first time that they were left alone, they broke the one and only rule they were given. Now, does that sound familiar? As a parent, it sounds familiar to me, and it makes me feel a lot better to know somebody else screwed up. So what can we do? I think we need to recognize that these young people are not adults. They will make mistakes, just as we did when we were teenagers. We cannot expect adult insight from them, nor can we treat them like 10-year-olds, but we must not stop parenting them. They don't need a babysitter, but we're still obligated to supervise. They choose their classes, their activities, and their friends, but that doesn't mean they still don't need guidance. They can drive themselves these days, but we still need to acquaint ourselves with their friends and their families. And we remain obligated to ask the embarrassing questions after they've been out for the evening. If we respect their privacy too much, our children will become strangers instead of our children. I think we need to talk to kids today. They are all struggling to be heard. Each and every one of them seeks approval, respect, and support. As our all too recent headlines demonstrate, they will go to extremes to get it. Our time cannot become so precious that we withhold it from our children. Through discussion, teenagers learn. Students must understand that inappropriate behavior, illegal or not, has consequences. And consequences cannot be merely threatened. We need to follow through. It's hard to say no. It's difficult to punish. But teens need that at times, and I think they even want it. We can be the excuse not to go to the beer party. They may want an excuse. But saying no or punishing cannot be a response to fear. There are times when we do need to listen to teens before we make decisions, and we need to explain our decisions. Our perspectives are different, and both the teen perspective and the parent perspective needs to be understood and respected. The hardest thing to teach is accepting responsibility for our own actions. It's okay to make a mistake because everybody does it. That's how we learn. It has to be okay in our community to say, "I'm sorry." An apology can't be viewed as a sign of weakness. It must be considered a source of strength. But we need to go beyond an apology. We need to eliminate anonymity and ask forgiveness from those who we've offended. That's more difficult because that makes it personal. It shows respect for the person that we've harmed, and it also shows respect for the offender. Will you, teacher or merchant or police officer or fellow student, forgive me for what I've done? Humility is almost obsolete in our society, and we need to revive it. It goes hand in hand with respect. From respect, hopefully tolerance and acceptance will flow. Those are also rare. If we accept responsibility, apologize, and seek forgiveness, then we also have to grant it. We need to forgive. We need to put the mistake behind us, learn its lesson, and move forward. Continuous reminders of mistakes only result in more mistakes. Forgiveness creates character, and that's what we need to build in this day and age. We teach most effectively by example, and therefore we must look to our own lives. Make close evaluation. Are our children merely following our example? Do we blame others when the fault lies with us? Do we accept responsibility for our own acts? I believe we have a great deal of damage to repair in this department thanks to President Clinton. Lyricists often say things more eloquently than I. Rogers and Hammerstein wrote, "You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from here to ear. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. Stephen Sondheim is even more poignant. Careful the things you say. Children will listen. Children may not obey, but children will see. Listen, careful the things you do, children will see and learn. Children may not obey, but children will listen. Children will look to you for which way to turn, to learn what to be. Careful before you say, listen to me. Children will listen. We need to listen. We need to supervise. We need to guide. We need to talk. We need to reward our children and punish them. Reassure them and remember them. Respect them. Expect great things from them, and then give them the confidence to meet those expectations. We need to emphasize the positive things in students' lives. As a community, we need to recognize their achievements. The Hudson Star Observer's coverage of the tremendous accomplishments of our students has expanded greatly in recent years, and more of the coverage is positive than negative. Wouldn't it be wonderful if our community was recognized for focusing on the good things that happen with our students each week? Remember, children will listen. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Detective Larson and Judge Garrity. You know, I heard something coming through both of those talks that I just had to jot down. I heard talk about young people needing approval, respect, and support. And our next speakers are going to talk about the programs in the school district. And I happen to be aware of one program in the school district which they may speak to. It's called the STRIVE program. It's a group of at-risk students who the school has developed a program for. And the students themselves named that program STRIVE. That's success through respect, initiative, vision, and effort. And in that program is a case where students get to rub shoulders with teachers and other community members and get just what our two first speakers were talking about: some approval, some respect, some support, some recognition. And I often think about what if some of those students who lashed out in violent ways had had that kind of exposure to adults. Maybe it would have been a more personal situation, and they wouldn't have been able to lash out quite in that violent way when there's a face and a person and a character to the people that they are lashing out at. So, without further ado, I think our first speaker from the school district will be Dr. Burns. Dr. Burns has been superintendent at the Hudson School District for 11 years. I've had the privilege to see him speak many times at the Rotary Club and other public forums, and I'm sure he will shed some light on our topic tonight. Without further ado, Dr. Burns, please.
Thank you, Garth. A number of things as it relates to the school district. We have expectations for our students. I think you, as parents of students, expect that we're going to accomplish certain things. I think you want students with fabulous test scores. We do. But we also want those students to become fabulous people and citizens. We want students that are knowledgeable, but we also want students that are responsible and caring. We want good academic skills, no question, but we also want students that have emotional skills, life skills, how to cope with anger and disappointment that are a natural part of growing up. So when you lose a girlfriend at 16, it isn't the end of the world and you bring a gun to school and shoot 6 people. That's not what it's about. We used to deal, we still do, with fire drills. I'm sure all of you did fire drills, didn't you, when you went to school? Remember, some of you now your age will be showing, remember the civil defense drills we used to do? We don't do those anymore. We've replaced those now with evacuations for bomb threats. We've replaced them with lockdowns because we have intruders. Different. I've been in the business 32 years, and it has really changed. Bomb threats is an example. I've been here, as he said, 11 years now. During my first 10 years, would anyone want to guess how many bomb threats we had in the school district? Well, we had two. We had two. We had one in North Hudson about 3 years ago, and it was some young kid in Minnesota who stole a cell phone and randomly called a number and put it on an answering machine over there. That, coupled with a stranger in the building over the weekend, created a real problem. He was apprehended, he was convicted, he was jailed, he was fined, all the things that needed to happen. We had another one about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. A young man on a computer threatened that a bomb was going to go off here at the high school at 11 o'clock. Thank goodness he gave us a time. Sometimes we don't have that. We were able to trace that back. We apprehended him, was a senior. We expelled him. And we haven't had any of that problem. I can't even begin to tell you how many bomb threats of that nature have occurred, even in our metropolitan area. The media has been somewhat reluctant to report it. It's been astounding how many, and all because of the incident in Colorado. There is not an administrator in this country, myself included, that doesn't want this year to end. And I've never, ever felt that way. This ought to be the time of elation and celebration and all of the good things that we spend so long in accomplishing, particularly for our seniors for 13 years. It's an extraordinarily good year in this school district, maybe one of the best. But isn't it interesting how in 1 month that can be turned? It has turned. Do you know there are 55 million students that attend schools every day in our United States? In 1997, 34 of those juveniles were killed in some manner at school. To date this year, 24 have been killed, 15 of them in Colorado alone. So if you think about that, schools still remain among the safest places for children to be. And we can't forget that. But we can't forget that losing one kid in a school is one too many. So we won't forget that. Schools have struggled to create safer environments, increasing security, and I'll talk a little bit about that, trying to head off threats with warnings, creating crisis places, changing dress codes, behavior codes, all of those things. However, schools, and this is the hardest part for me, schools cannot stop insanity from manifesting itself. No matter how much security we provide, those who are bent on destruction, particularly where it involves their own self-destruction, can't be stopped. Not in the open society that we live in. And that is the scary part about the fact that we live in this country, and it is free, and it is open. The profile of the perpetrators is somewhat well known. We know it. Hopefully you know it. Everyone should know it. White males. Generally above average intelligence. Isolated. Outcast or rejected. Disaffected and ridiculed in some way. Frequent players of violent video games and visitors to raw sites on the internet. Fans of excruciating savage films. These perpetrators spend hours outside of the school environment unsupervised. By who? Parents. Most obtain their guns and their bombs or weapons from someone else, or someone they know, or a relative. What's their goal? Gain revenge. We went to school, maybe it was a punch or two and it was over. Weapons now take that to a whole different level. What's their goal? Making some kind of an emphatic public statement. What's their goal? Inflict massive harm on many. On many. Many innocent. Have nothing to do with how they feel. And in every case, almost every case, even Colorado, someone in that school heard about it and believed that something was going to happen and it wasn't right. Did they take action? Parents in every case are in total disbelief. This isn't my kid. This couldn't have happened. Total denial on the part of parents. And the last item is the belief that it could never happen in our community. And I know I listened to Paul, and we are a fortunate community, but could it happen here? Sure. Sure. Could happen anywhere. We have a choice as a school district to try to react to these things or to be proactive and try to be out in front of these things. We can respond or we can react. We can prevent, we can intervene, we can choose any one of those things, and we have tried a number of those things. In fact, I wore my visual name tag today. We've joined, although these aren't 3M products, but we've joined 3M, okay? Every one of our employees now has a name tag. We did that this year prior to any of this happening so that when people come into the schools, they know who our employees are, and we know who they aren't, which is another thing that's hard to differentiate. But that also was the time when we were concerned about intruders. Someone coming in and doing something other than our students. And now, we may have to worry about some of the people that we have already inside. That's another dimension we have to work with. So, security. I caught quite a bit of heat about our monitoring station out there this last year. It was firebombed in the first 2 weeks. The glass was broken out twice in the first 2 weeks till we got smarter than some of the students. And now it's an accepted part of the school. When school is here, we shut it down. I'm not sure that as a parent you want to think about, or let's say not your daughter, it wouldn't be your daughter, it'd be someone else's daughter, calling on the phone, making this arrangement, and some 19-year-old or whatever who's not a student here drives up, they run out the door, jump in the car, and they're gone. There's some security here at least to prevent that from happening. We prevented some students from other schools, some gang-related influences also showing up here to just sort of drive around or get into our parking lot. And our students, I think, after a while accepted it. But for a while, they didn't like it. It was restrictive. And I had parents telling me, but the good kids, why can't they go to lunch? And some of them still tried, locking kids in trunks. Talk about that. Is that safe? Well, we're past that one, I think, now, too. But the fact is that the first time one of those kids takes somebody else's kid and wraps it around a tree on their way to McDonald's and trying to get back here in 15 minutes, you're not going to be very happy with us. And you probably shouldn't be. So we're trying to make some degree of safety within this school, some security measures. We've had a number of programs in place, and Nancy's going to talk about a lot of those, too. Our sudden death, suicide response plan has been here prior to my coming. I think it's probably 12 years old. And it's one of those things you hate to even have to use it, but we have. I don't think we had this year, but at least twice last year. And it's amazing how that plan goes into operation and can make itself available to the family and to other kids that are affected by the death of a student. Those are some proactive, maybe reactive things that we do. Garth mentioned Strive for at-risk students, program for sophomores. We expanded it to freshmen. Our board approved the fact that it will also be there for juniors and a small piece for seniors next year to try and help kids make it. Nancy will talk about a progressive discipline plan that we have, but we also are not afraid when we fail. I wish we were successful with every kid. We're not. We have a pre-expulsion hearing with students who have committed an expellable offense to determine whether or not we take that to the Board of Education for expulsion. We did 20 of those hearings this year. We expelled 10 students this year. That's an all-time record. It's not a good feeling. But you got 1,200 kids on this campus that are better off today because those 10 aren't here. And the 10 that are still here got the message. And there's some success that's going on with those 10 right now. But we have to have a safe environment here. And if students are going to not play by the rules, at some point we have to say, then you need to be someplace else. And we're not afraid to do that, and our board has done that. We just developed a new classroom code of conduct that will go into effect next year as part of a new state statute. In fact, our board will be approving that in May. And this is when a teacher wants a student removed from their room for certain kinds of behaviors. Todd Tingblad, who I'm not sure is going to be here tonight, he's our technology guru. In fact, he's developed a whole new internet, intranet policy, guidelines policy. Some of you have been signing off on those. Well, we're learning right along with the kids, and they keep learning faster than we do in some of those things, but we think we've got a pretty good handle on that. And if Todd's not here, in the next district newsletter, if some of you are here, to talk about how to monitor your kids' use of the internet at home, because yours is probably not filtered, ours is. If he's not here, I'm going to have him write that up, and we'll put that in our next district newsletter, and it'll be distributed to all 8,000 people in our school district, so that if you want to know what kids are doing, you want to know how to find out what they're doing, you're able to do that. We're going to hopefully get an advisement program started here at the high school next year, so our high school kids connect with an adult. Much like if any of you have had kids in our middle school, you know in the house concept, that's there. It isn't currently here. We've added counselors at the high school. I think we have 4 now. I'm sure they'd like to have more. We've added another one out at the middle school. We have 3 where we used to have 2. Again, recognizing that that is an area that does need some need. I'm going to let Nancy talk a little bit more about the programs and some of the services that our school districts provide. And Garth, if you want to do the introduction there, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. Our next speaker is Nancy Sweet. I see in the newspaper she's recently completed 15 years of service to the district. She is the Director of Pupil Services, and she's also very active in the community, and she's recently taken over as President of Community Action. Welcome, Nancy.
Okay. Thank you, all of you, for being here this evening, and you've heard some pretty impassioned speakers thus far. One of the purposes of tonight's meeting is really to interact with you, and my comments are going to be very brief. I do want to identify programs, services, and initiatives within the Hudson School District that have been designed, first of all, to assist our various school communities to be safe, caring and rewarding places for students to be. And secondly, to appropriately further the academic and social development of our students. Some of these programs and services I will merely mention. I do want to highlight just a couple that are more recently developed. In 1995, 30 school and community representatives came together to develop a strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan. It's called Vision 2000, and 7 strategies were developed, one of which says to develop and implement a plan to enhance character development, and you've heard that referenced this evening already, and to decrease behaviors that interfere with a safe and caring learning environment. We're going to be entering our 5th year of this plan, and we have several achievements to identify. We have developed policies in reference to this strategy, and we do have several of them here if you're interested in them. We have a policy on core character traits that we developed through a community consensus process. We have a policy on service learning, and I'll define that in a moment. Dr. Burns mentioned our student dress code policy, which was developed over a period of several years with my colleague Dan Koch as a facilitator, and community, parents, and students and staff as part of that effort. We do have a discipline policy that the fundamentals of which are the core character traits, respect and responsibility. For the past 4 years, the district has provided staff development for a program that's called Responsive Classroom. These are strategies. It's not a curriculum, but it's strategies that teachers introduce within classrooms, elementary, middle, and in some classrooms at the high school, Thrive being one of those programs, where the basic character traits are taught and reinforced as a matter of learning and being together. Student teamwork is emphasized, pro-social skills are taught, and a strong sense of belonging and unity is developed. The research is very clear that if these concepts are taught, if these behaviors are reinforced in the learning environment, social outcomes increase, and so does learning. Academic achievement is bettered. Service learning is another outgrowth of the district strategic planning. Service learning has been defined by the school district to mean activities which are student-driven, which are curriculum-based, which meet a genuine need in the community, which engage students in the application and experience of learning concepts in the curriculum, and these projects are subject to purposeful reflection and evaluation. Community service is a related concept. It's not exactly the same, and is more of a court-prescribed activity for retribution, perhaps. But the service learning concept, which I know the community will hear more and more about, is really curriculum-based and meant to enhance student learning, and at the same time develop self-esteem due to helping others and reinforcing basic character traits. We have several programs which I'll just identify that are in operation relative to service learning. The Students Who Care program at the middle school started last year with a youth mini grant and now involves close to 100 members, 6th, 7th, 8th, Dan. They're associating together for the purpose of helping those in need in and outside of school. The Board of Education just approved what's called a St. Croix Service Connection, and this is a collaboration with the University of Wisconsin Extension and the Rotary to match, again, genuine community needs with students under the adult mentoring and supervision of Rotarians. In terms of teacher training, the school district received a grant from the Corporation for National Service this year, and Community Action helped match that along with some district funds, and we have completed a course for teachers contracted with the National Youth Leadership Council, which happens to be located in the Twin Cities. A very valuable resource for us. Teachers who took this class are now implementing projects in their classrooms. They'll be finishing within the next few days. In the fall, all of our faculty will receive an orientation on service learning, and those students who are now involved in projects and their teachers we'll talk about that with our faculty in the fall. We plan to offer another introduction class and an advanced class. The district does not require service learning as a credit for graduation, but with its policy, with its commitment to staff development, the integration within the curriculum, it's strongly promoted and encouraged. Paul has identified the police school liaison officer. I think that is a program or service associated with the promotion of a safe and caring learning environment. We do not look upon the police school liaison officer as someone who arrests people and gives them citations, but we really view that person as a prevention agent and as a member of the pupil services team, K-12. Garth mentioned our STRIVE program at the high school. We have other at-risk programs. We identify children with their parents as early as elementary level who are beginning to show signs of not liking school particularly, are having friendship problems, maybe underachieving, beginning not to attend school regularly. We have what's called the after-school enrichment program. There's a family involvement component to that program. This year, the middle school, keep referencing Dan back there because he's here, is the AIM program, Achievement in the Middle, I think it stands for, and basically, again, that's a mechanism whereby students are identified early and are more closely monitored and mentored, by some of our teachers, and parents receive even a greater degree of communication. In addition to STRIVE at the high school, we have our alternative night school, which has been in operation for over a decade. We have a student support team process operating in every building, whereby teachers come to a team of other teachers and pupil services staff for help with student behavior problems and student achievement problems, and ideas, as how to address those problems in the classroom. Our peer helper program at the high school is absolutely a model program. Multi-age homeroom at the middle school, another model based on the research that contributes to the development of good character. Parent education, an event like this evening, the school district is always eager to partner with community organizations to offer events for parents. I think the school district has always paid attention to these issues, but I can say for a fact that we've been continuously and strategically engaged since 1995, and I'll just repeat the particular strategy to develop character education and decrease behaviors that interfere with a safe and caring learning environment. And I'm sure I've forgotten dozens of other things because they all overlap and go together so closely. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. You know, it's heartening to know that we have such a proactive approach, both in terms of law enforcement and our public school system. And as I listen to some of the programs that are going on, I think what a good job the school is doing in that sense. And then it makes me question also, well, what do we as people in the community do? How do, you know, we shouldn't just leave this up to law enforcement and to the school. We have to be actively involved some way. And one thing that I have learned in having an opportunity to interact with some of the Strive kids and having an opportunity to hear some of the Search Institute people from Minneapolis who are very much involved in a grassroots effort across the nation of looking at what it is that makes successful kids be successful. And one of the tenets of their philosophy is that the successful kids are successful because they have a lot of support from parents and from other adults in their community. They make the assertion that each child needs 6 interested adults beside their parents to grow up with the healthy kind of values that we would like for them to grow up. And that if you can do one thing for a child in your neighborhood that goes a long way toward helping in this regard, it's just knowing their name. It sounds like such a simple thing. As a Rotarian, there are many other Rotarians in the room. We've had a chance to interact with the Strive kids, go out to the Y Camp, climb towers with them, do adventure learning activities. And you know what's the most powerful thing that I have experienced is being in the community, recognizing those kids, and having had the good fortune to luckily remember some of their names, and then calling them by name and seeing their reaction, and seeing how it opened up a conversation. And from that experience, knowing myself that I was going to write all their names down and make sure I knew them all, so that when I saw them that I could duplicate that, because it felt good to me, and I think it felt pretty good to them too. So maybe that's something that all of us can take with us. If you have a child in your neighborhood who you think may be at risk or just needs somebody, just know their name, and it'll open up all kinds of opportunities and hopefully be very helpful in their development. Well, we're privileged to have with us a couple members from our own Hudson Medical Center here tonight. We have Pat Leahy and Gail McCann, who are going to talk to us about the Chemical Dependency and Domestic Abuse Program. Pat, would you like to start first? Or? Good. Please welcome Pat.
I might sound a little bit like an oxymoron. We recently closed our adolescent program at the hospital. And for what reason? Maybe insurances, it may be there just wasn't enough kids coming in at the time, and it was with much thought and a very sad heart that we did have to close. We miss some of the people that were involved with that. But we do hope in the future to somehow be involved with with some anger management program through the courts and with the schools, so it isn't like we've given up on the kids, and we're always there to help process any kind of referrals to other programs. The reason Gail and I decided to do this together was because what we are finding is the house of abuse is is probably something we are all involved with in some way or another. And Gail she runs our domestic abuse program at the hospital, and this involves kids as well as adults, but we don't do the program for the kids, but we do know that our kids are certainly living in this kind of a home, some of them. And Gail is going to walk through that with you. Would you?
Yeah, I'll do that, right?
Right. This is Gail.
This is the house of abuse. Can you hear me without the mic?
You got to get over on this side now.
Okay.
We're frickin' crack.
And I would like to claim that I designed it, but I didn't. It was designed by Mike McGrain of the Wilder Program and St. Paul. And Mike gave us permission to use his house. Now, like good homeowners, we did like all good homeowners do, we remodeled it, right? And what we did is we added some features to Mike's house. And I would like to start with knowing that the house is built to do this in 10 minutes, I'm really going to try to rattle on. So, the house is built on a foundation of power and control. And as you walk in the door, or up to the door, that's where we did some of that remodeling, you walk into the room called verbal abuse, right at the door. And in that doorway, I'm going to use my cheat sheets. I don't have to think because that really takes me a longer time. So some of the things that we find at that door is silence, yelling, screaming, name-calling, swearing, put-downs, and controlling arguments. Now there's a whole bunch more that's going on that I continue to learn all the time. As you walk through the door and you go to, and I have a different pattern, so what do we got down there? Emotional abuse. And know that some of these things can blend from room to room. We'll hear them repeated in room to room. One of the things I want to tell you about this house is that it's not a day house. It's not those people. This is a us house. If we're human, we probably have lived in some of these rooms of this house. All of us, I believe, have been abusive to some degree and been abused to some degree. Maybe not the severity that we're seeing and hearing out there, but we certainly fit there. I need to tell you right away, and I was really pleased with my introduction. That's as close as many have got. It's Gail McMahon, but I like to go by the idea that my name is Gail, not God. I don't have all the answers. So I depend on other people to get those. Another thing that is helpful is that little saying from Galileo, that wise guy, you know. He said that you can't teach a person anything. You help them learn their answers from within, and that's what our job is, to help look at those things. So we'll go to the emotional room, and some of those in the emotional room are mind games, name calling, breaking things, bringing up the past, accusations, double messages, comparing people to others, withholding affection. And we go from that room then down to the intimidation room, or up, whatever level that is at. And the intimidation is threats to kill or harm. If you don't do this, I'm going to do that. If you do this, I'll do that. I'll kill you. I'll kill me. Those are pretty severe threats. Weapons, gestures, words, looks, that dirty look from across the room that can stop you dead in your tracks. And who's really best at that? Parents, right? Okay. Threatening to take the children, harassment, talking constantly, not letting someone to add to the discussion, superiority of job or education. And then, let's see, we go across to social isolation. This is a real tough room. We call this a no room. No friends, no food, no fun, no family, no money, no school, no job, no anything, unless the person who is in power control says that that's okay. And when they do that, then they'll often jump over to the emotional room and say, I never said that. What, are you crazy? I never said we could do that. So it's that constant mind games, that crazy making stuff that goes on. Okay, and then, I want to say just a bit more about that social room. I was talking to some judges from Minnesota who we were talking about how that can sometimes be a prison, and it becomes a prison. And I thought, how could that be so? And when I see that, I envision barbed wire fences. So one of the walls of social isolation is possessiveness, another is fear, another is jealousy, and I couldn't figure out what the last wall was, and someone from group helped me and said, that wall is hope, H-O-P-E, hope. That keeps us locked into a lot of situations here, because we hope beyond hope that things will get better. And we talked about insanity, and we talk about insanity being doing the same things over and over and over and hoping for better results. Doesn't happen. Okay. The sexual abuse room. Name calling, accusations of affairs, pornography, sexual jokes, grabbing, pinching, all the rapes, dating rape, marital rape, acquaintance rape, any kind of forced sexual acts, degrading body parts, sexual comments in public, talking people into and manipulating into the sex act, withholding sex, threatening to get it elsewhere. Those are some. Then moving up to the roles of the family. Excuse me, the roles and the rules of the family. That used to in Mike's house was male privilege, and we've changed that because we know that people are abusive, and our whole goal is to stop abuse. So we're talking about how we misuse our status of who we are, because I'm the mother, because you're the dad, and that's how it's got to be. The stereotypes that we come into families with the roles about how should women be and how should men be, and knowing now that the should word is a swear word anyhow, we need to change that. The way that the stereotypes that we learn about is how women should act, how men should act. And then we come in, two people into this relationship, and demand and want that done, and go to the emotional room and say, you should know how you should be. Causes all kinds of trouble because the communication's long gone. That left real early after the relationship got together. The physical room, that's what we see, usually. That's what gets identified so people can come in and get help. That's the hitting, the pushing, the shoving, the ripping, the pulling hair, the spitting, restraining, sleep deprivation. I've left my script now. I've been in my thinking. It gets me in trouble. Those kinds of things. Breaking things, smashing things, throwing things. In my day and age, we were told that if you're angry, you're supposed to vent it. You're supposed to act it out. Well, what that does is, if I get real mad and I start throwing tables and chairs and books or whatever all around, the message to the people around is, be careful, you're next. Or then I go into the guilt room and the emotional room and say, you caused it. We learn in this house to blame because we don't want to get into feelings. So we learn that pretty early on how to do that. The physical, I like to discount when we're doing groups because many people can be very, very abusive without any physical things going on, the rest of that abuse in that house. The physical abuse, this was taught to me by a client who said, physical abuse, you bleed, you bruise, you scar on the outside. These other types of abuses, we bleed, bruise, scar on the inside. And I thought that made a lot of sense to me because that's true. It kills the spirit, the other rooms. The religion room, we've added on to that values and beliefs. There was a time when people would go to their clergy to try to get help about what's going on in this house, and they were told to go back, pray harder, see what they're doing wrong. They should be able to make that house work. They should be able to keep that house together. And many of them would try that, and they'd go back and they would give totally of themselves to get peace at any price. And it didn't work so good. We added on their values and beliefs because anytime a person need to give up their values or beliefs in order to try to keep this house safer is abusive. They get lost in that struggle. Okay, I want to save that for last. I want to talk about chemical dependency and chemical abuse. That's what we added on to the house. There are many good programs out there that taught us everything we know about domestic abuse. But as chemical dependency background, we know that if you leave an active alcoholic or a using chemical person in and try to teach them these other things, we're dealing with a drugged mind. We need to have sobriety here. So we say, and we used to believe in the field, that if you cap the chimney, remove the substance, that everything was going to be better. Well, we learned that that wasn't quite right. Because when you did that, you oftentimes took away the coping mechanism, and what you left were small fires here building up. The illustration is a very good one, because most of us can say, well, and most of us have used the line, but you don't understand, that's not how I grew up. If I grew up in this house and I was taught that red was blue, I would have to believe that, because they were my teachers. Get out into society, and they say, no, excuse me, red is red. And I say, no, that's not how it was at my house. So what happens is that if we grew up in a house like that, and we did, some of us grew up in different areas, different rooms that affected us, that we believed that that was the right way because our teachers were very important to us. Our teachers were the adults in our lives. We saved the child abuse room for last, and I don't have a listing for that because we've worked with children, young adults, and they say don't bother don't bother to make a list of all of the things. Just draw a line to every room in the house, into the chemical room also, all of the rooms of the house, and that is child abuse. If a child has to witness one person or two people that they love beating each other up, either physically or in all of the other rooms of the house, that is horribly abusive. And they most often will believe that they caused that abuse to happen. They don't talk about it. They don't mention it. They have been taught, as many of us have been taught, to put our feelings within, because when we talk about our feelings, we become ridiculed, embarrassed, ashamed, and also sometimes it's validated. You're right. You should have been a better child. You should have cleaned better. You should have been faster. You should have had higher grades. You should have. So many times a child will buy into their hearts that they were the ones that caused all of this stuff to happen. And there is a cycle of abuse. We recycle that. There is hope here. There is hope. We have developed a house on the back side of that house called the Healthy House. And so we wanted them all to relabel all of the different rooms in a positive, healthy fashion. Our papers came back, that was given homework. Take that blank paper home, fill in, make good, positive titles for those rooms, and bring back the homework, and we'll talk about it in group. Well, they brought it back, and the houses were empty. We said, why didn't you do your homework? Why didn't you fill in those rooms? And they said, if we would have known what to put in the healthy rooms, we wouldn't be in your stupid class. Is that not scary? There's a lot we have to do, and I hear a lot of the things that are going on in the schools that are helping that. But if you came from that background, and I need to tell you that we have very many groups going in a high attendance in our domestic and anger management groups. These are not horrible, rotten, evil people. These are our brothers, our uncles, our cousins, our families who have made some very bad choices in dealing with their anger. And so they're not terrible people, but they're many people learning new ways and new alternatives on how to deal with their anger. Doesn't mean you can't get angry, but we have to find different ways to deal with that. So I think I would like to have Pat finish. This is what we base our program on, and it's a lot of what you've heard already. So I'll have Pat read this.
This is kind of going along with what Sue was saying, and as children learn what they live, and we hand this out very often as one of our handouts to our families. If children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. If children live with hostility, they learn to fight. If children live with ridicule, they learn to be shy. If children live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. If children live with tolerance, they learn to be patient. If children live with encouragement, they learn confidence. If children live with praise, they learn to appreciate. If children live with fairness, they learn justice. If children live with security, they learn to have faith. If children live with approval, they learn to like themselves. If children live with acceptance and friendship, they learn to find love in the world.
Thank you very much, Pat and Gail. If you're like me, I feel like there's a kind of a sense of closure here. All of these things are interconnected, and we're about to bring this to full closure now by having our last speakers talk about a children's search for spirituality. We have a couple of very qualified people to do that. Firstly, Miss Sonia Dixon is going to speak to us. She's a former youth leader at the Trinity Lutheran Church, and she's now studying, I understand, her master's program, and so has gone on to do more work in that area. Please welcome Sonia.
After sitting on those stools, I know why students have short lunch breaks. I will not be offended if some of you feel like you need to stand up and stretch while I'm speaking. I've had the privilege of working with teenagers for the last 18 years, and I do count it a privilege. I'm also passionate about spiritual growth, And so I'd like to thank the Community Action Council for acknowledging, for recognizing the significance of spirituality in teens. Recently, I met with a group of 9 teenagers, and I asked them to describe the youth culture as they see it here in Hudson. With their permission, here are their descriptives. Selfish, materialistic, indifferent, valueless, hopeless, fast-paced, anti-authority, information overload, live for today, short-term futures, no consequences, familyless, searching. Their descriptions match well with everything I've read and heard about today's youth culture. Our children are a generation of young people that have grown up in a postmodern world. Briefly, the postmodern worldview can be summed up with 4 generalizations. They include, number 1, pessimism. Human progress has been replaced by human misery. Life is like a Super Mario Brothers game. The odds are stacked against the player. Number 2, the idea that feelings and relationships supersede logic and reason. Scientific discovery has met virtual reality. Number 3, community supersedes the individual. Belonging is best. And number 4, truth is relative. I just heard a speaker describe our culture as the land of cultural maybes. This is the world we live in. This generation doesn't just look and act and dress differently than previous generations. They truly think differently, perceive differently, believe differently, and process truth differently. This is a generation that has grown up without trust. Politics, religion, the family, education have disappointed many of them. In the past, youth have searched for truth, but this generation has learned truth is whatever you decide it to be. This generation is looking for trust. There are many books written now on passages of life, certain times in life that have greater transition than others. Interestingly, 2 of these transition times are often happening within the same household at the same time. They are the teen years and midlife. Most of us would agree this creates for interesting dynamics. And as much as there are limited common denominators between the 2 stages, there is one significant common denominator. During both periods of time, there is often the recognition that there must be something more. There's a desire for significance, for meaning in life. There is a void that needs to be filled. Teens try to fulfill this longing through relationships, awards and recognition, material things, maybe substances. Adults have spent a lifetime striving for that successful career, for material wealth, satisfying hobbies, meaningful relationships. Eddie Murphy once said, "I'm paranoid. I do this and I do that. I can buy anything I want. I can have anything I want. But I'm still not happy. I wonder why I'm not happy." It's when we discover that these things and these positions do not satisfy, that they do not provide happiness, that we go in search of spirituality. So what is spirituality? I'd like to suggest a very broad definition. Spirituality is a person's expression of concern for the inner world of the soul. Let me repeat that. A person's expression of concern for the inner world of the soul. And for today's youth, that spirituality is not just something believed. It is something experienced. Young people are not interested in spirituality that is professed, but that does not affect a life. Remember the postmodern worldview? An intense quest for community and relationships. feeling over formula, significance over success. For youth who feel marginalized, not accepted for who they are, spirituality offers assurance that they are no longer left in the margin. For youth yearning for family, they can find a sense of belonging. This love-hungry generation is longing for community, for camaraderie with something or someone that makes a difference. Often the spirituality of today's youth is a mix-and-match theology. While questioning one's religious upbringing during adolescence has always been common, today's youth are going a bit further. They're looking at what various faiths have to offer, picking out the parts they like best about each, and forming their own composite religions. Author Douglas Copeland describes this as meism, the search by an individual, often in the absence of training or traditional religious tenets, to formulate a personally tailored religion by him or herself. Even within a particular faith, students may go to worship one place for the music, they may go to another for fellowship with friends, and still to another for good teaching. I asked the same group of students I mentioned earlier how to reach out to the people, to the students in their described culture. They claimed it is often through the emotional pain of incidents like Littleton, or like the death of friends in car accidents, or the loss of friendships, or divorce. Our children are part of a needy generation. As my small group of students so perceptibly recognized, need is a great attention getter, a great motivator, and a great revealer. The student search for spirituality provides reconciliation, peace, justice, a new family system. There are those who think spirituality is a crutch. I agree. Wounded people need a crutch, and we are all wounded people. Our children are, we are. We all need to be healed. So what can we do? Youth need and want relationships with adults who are loving, accepting, and caring. They respond to adults who are open and honest, who treat them with respect, and who listen carefully to what they say. Youth are searching and struggling with many questions, including their spirituality. But there is nothing that turns off a young person faster than an adult who has all the answers and is willing to tell everyone exactly what to believe and when to believe it. This generation of youth long for opportunities to reflect and to explore the meaning of life. This was very apparent in the bios of the senior music students at the Choral Awards Tea the other night, and in Beth Holmes' comments about this class of seniors. Several times, comments were made about students philosophizing on life and discussing significant issues. We can see the direction youth are going. We can try to help them make good decisions, yet they may choose another path. At times, all we can do is to be there, to hold them, to dry their tears, to pick them up when they've fallen, and to assure them that they are forgiven and still loved. No matter what youth say or do, adults must be there to love them. Remember the last descriptive my students used for their culture? It was searching. Statistically, 95% of high school students are interested in spirituality. This is good news. 95%. We're sitting on a pile of potential to turn our world around. And I want to tell you, I talk to young people every day who are committed to doing just that. Our last speaker is one of those world changers.
Thank you very much, Sonia. In introducing our last speaker here, I had the opportunity to meet him tonight and speak with him a little bit. Haven't known him before tonight, but certainly impressed. I can't help but harken back, I think it was Judge Garrity who mentioned that the Star Observer has now taken on the practice of reporting a number of the positive things that are going on in our community. And in the midst of discussing all of the problems and issues and things that are plaguing us, let's not lose sight of all of the wonderful young people that we do have. If you go to Sonia's presentations at the Trinity Church, you see a number of positive young people. If you go to the Phipps Center, you're just inspired and filled with awe from positivity. I had a chance to see the Joseph production here at the high school. We have so many terrific young people, and our last speaker is an example of that kind of person. I'm understanding that he gave quite a presentation over the loudspeaker system the day following the Littleton tragedy, and I'm anxious to hear what he has to say to us tonight. Michael Struzas, please give us your perspective.
Can everyone hear me without the microphone? I hate microphones. Well, first I'll tell you a little about myself. I'm a student here, I'm a junior in school here, and in this world that we live in, I found that becoming an adult, a man in my case, is based upon experience, the knowledge you gain from them, and what you search throughout your life. Not how many birthdays you celebrated to your physical body, but what you search for on the inside. How you've grown, how many years you've lived on the inside. I don't really want to go into the past, but I'll just say that experiences have made me grow very fast. I lived in almost neglect, fear, danger for many, many years of my childhood until things changed. I want to talk to you tonight basically about man of spirituality and how many of my peers, including myself, are much more spiritual than many adults would believe, because many of them do not share it and show it to adults because they're worried that adults will stereotype us as being young, so obviously we don't know anything about it because we haven't experienced life enough. And I just ask all adults who are listening, keep an open mind to young people, because the society we live in forces us to grow up much faster than the society you live in. The world today is driven by the minority, not the majority. It's driven by greed and selfishness and fear and power, not virtuous teaching. If the world was guided by love and peace and compassion and harmony, I don't think that there would even be need for meetings like this. But it's not. Can my generation change that? I think so. Basically, all I can say is that adults are the best tool to use in many of my peers who are struggling and striving and trying to find something more in life, because they lash out at society because of how they're treated by their peers, adults, and whoever. So they break the law, skip school, smoke, do drugs, etc., so on. If adults all the time could try their best to portray the image that they want their children to be, I guarantee you that there would not be as many people in front of Judge Garrity as we have. I myself was one of them when I was 14 years old, because I hadn't learned as many valuable lessons that I have already. And the problem is that I see it every day in teachers, in administrators, and I'm trying to rag on those people all, but the tone and the way that my peers are spoken to, they're talked down to a lot, they're treated like children a lot, and that just builds up more of the want to lash out, because then they feel like no one's listening to them. And the truth is that not enough adults do listen to my peers and myself. You really need to open your mind and your ears and listen, not just hear. And don't think of them as a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old talking to you. Think of them as a member of the human race talking to you, wanting more and wanting to listen. So I'm not going to go into my personal religious beliefs, because that's not what this is. A little basic philosophy, theology, thinking, I'm going to go into a little bit. The main goal that our society should take is to live with love. Love, to me, that's what I believe the meaning of existence of life is love. Everything it exists in and everything it creates. Love makes compassion. That in turn makes peace. Peace is tolerance. And you go so on down the chain of positive emotions that makes happiness and harmony and joy. And from love, everything wonderful in this world is created. But then it's opposite, hate. Hate lives with fear. Hate is anguish. Hate is pain. Hate is sadness. And that goes so on, and hate creates all negative emotions. So if you can create, as adults, I put a lot of responsibility on you. Live with love as much as you can. Portray that to young people. Portray that to each other. And then I promise you, my peers and adults alike will follow suit. And maybe over time, we'll change to be more accepting in society. I don't know. I hope so. I think my generation has the potential to do it because there's so many of us that are very, very talented and really could do a lot. We just apply ourselves. I lost my train of thought for a second now. I personally love every human being as my brother and as my sister. I may dislike some people's personalities, the personalities created by the world we live in, but as a human being, I respect them and I love them. Because the people who do the worst things need the most love and the most forgiveness and tolerance. But so many times, everyone has their back turned on them. And that is what creates things like the Littleton, Colorado incident. That upset me more than almost anything in my entire lifetime, to see such meaningless, brutal violence among human beings. Not just because they're my age, just human beings in general. In America, where we're supposed to be a great society, which we're not. And then in Kosovo, genocide, killing based upon the discrimination of race, religious beliefs, and whatever someone believes in. You have to ask yourself questions when you look at society and think, where did we go wrong? What happened to humanity? What happened to everything? Why does it like this? Aren't our elected officials doing their jobs? That's just the thing. So few people decide everything for the entire human race. If you have something on your mind, bring it up to your town council member, bring it up to your boss, bring it up to the senator, bring it up to our congressman. If we as a society, American society, all brought up our ideas and comments and thoughts to our political leaders, we could do so very much. But everyone just keeps quiet because they think, oh, maybe not many people agree with what I have to say. Won't bother. It's a problem, not bother. And this is supposed to go children's search for spirituality, and that's a big thing. Many people don't bother to reflect on the positive things that youths do. We only hear about and look at the negative things that people my age do. We look at how the drinking is. We see in the news when we see about the gang members. We see what we look in the Colorado incident. We hear about how many kids are in court, how many kids skip class, and how many teenage pregnancies there is, how many sexually transmitted diseases. Why don't we hear about how 95% of youths are interested in spirituality? Why don't we hear about how big the church following is in this day and age by youth? Why don't we hear about the positive things that kids do? Like Sonia has reminded her in church that they're going to go and evangelize on the streets. That may be a surprise to many of you. Why don't we hear about things like that? That to me is amazing, that people have the courage to just walk with perfect strangers and evangelize spirituality to them. So that's kind of a challenge I can set upon to everyone. I ask every one of you to evangelize. Evangelize love. Evangelize just positive human nature. There's true human nature, and then there's human nature that society has created. The one that society has created is the one that's interested in wealth and the outer stuff. Everything materialistic wealth. The true human nature really wants spiritual wealth. They want to develop the inner self, the level of consciousness, thought, philosophy, art, music, literature, beautiful, wonderful things. But that's not the way it is anymore. Can it be changed? Yes, it can. But it starts with the people who are adults now who have more power to influence than people my age do, to teach my generation, the ones that can't find themselves a positive lifestyle, and then in turn they'll grow up and teach a positive lifestyle. So it's like we all teach and help each other. Because to me, the one true spiritual belief, religious belief, is what everyone thinks put together. Not just what one person believes, but what everyone believes together. Every positive thing each one of you has in your mind right now on how you treat others is different from every other one. But all of us together, this entire human race, that makes up what true spirituality really is. We can't do it without each other. We can't do it alone. We all have to grow as individuals, but then share our individual philosophy and spirituality with others. So I prompt you to share what you believe with everyone you can. Share it with young people, share it with your peers. We have to do it alone and together at the same time. It's like a paradox. You have to create your beliefs and your spirituality and your philosophy on life by yourself. With guidance, yes, maybe from a church or from a minister. But create on your own. Believe what you want to believe. And then teach it to others and then learn about theirs. And then in turn, it has a synergistic effect where it just multiplies. And then everyone is tolerant of everyone else. And then where there's tolerance, there's going to be harmony. Where there's harmony, there's going to be peace. Where there's peace, there's going to be compassion. Where there's compassion, there's going to be love for every human being on this earth. Maybe someday in the future, everything will be shared equally. There will not be poverty, there won't be hate. But that may be far off, or it may not be far off. But it all came back to love, as we see. Love is the answer to every problem. Love is the meaning of life. Thank you.
Michael, thank you for having the courage to share your convictions with us. I don't know what I would have had the courage to share at age 16. It wouldn't have been anything like that. And so I'm very impressed, and keep those ideals. I think it reminds me and reminds some of us in Community Action, we've talked about this, we need to hear more people like Michael. We need to have a youth forum, and that's probably the next thing that is on our agenda, to get interaction from the young people, because that's where the answers are. You know, we've had a wonderful panel of experts here. We want to open it up now to the audience. If you feel so inclined, I will make the microphone available to you to ask questions. Please address one of the panel people. If you don't feel so inclined, there are Community Action people who would be happy to take a question if you want to write it on a sheet of paper and ask it out loud. I think what I'll do while you're formulating your questions is just walk out with this microphone. Do we have anybody who's ready to ask a question right off the bat here? Yes, ma'am. Let me make my way out there. Maybe you'll have to come up here and meet me. We'll meet in the middle.
Right. I have a few questions. I really appreciate the panel and the various different perspectives. One of my questions is, have they apprehended any of the kids that have, or kids, whoever, the perpetrators of the bomb threats this year? And I haven't heard anything about that. I wonder if there's any information on that can be said about, have they caught anybody?
That's an open investigation.
Okay.
Can we hear that?
And I want to qualify, that's a presumption that they're kids.
You're right. I'm not sure that they're kids. I meant perpetrators. The second question that I have is, I heard several people say Hudson is a safe school, safe community, and the schools are safe, and relatively they're safe. We could be somewhere where it was less safe than here. But last year there was a fight at the high school that caused the removal of one of the break periods, because it was a significant fight, enough fight to make some changes. And so I have several kids in school. I've had one of my kids beat up by another kid in school in Hudson. I didn't expect that. I don't like it. I felt it was handled very appropriately by the school as well as the court system. But I think that I'm a little concerned about saying too broadly that we have a safe community and a safe school, because there are incidences here that are disturbing and we need to be paying attention to. One of the things, so I guess that's more of a comment than a question. Another question I have is, have there been any searches into restorative justice measures in this community and circle sentencing and those kinds of processes that bring both perpetrators and victims together in solving crimes? Maybe Judge Garrity, you can answer that.
Thanks. I'm not aware of any at the municipal level. I know that a couple summers ago I met with Judge Wopet from North Hudson, who was very interested in pursuing a restorative justice program. Problem is funding to do that. But we met with a speaker from Dakota County, Minnesota, who had a program that was very successful. I don't know that in the city of Hudson, with the caseload that I see, that it is something that is a priority, because I don't see as many property crimes, crimes that have victims that would justify that. I don't know where it is at the circuit court level. I suspect that at the circuit court level there is a lot more instances where you do have a victim, and I know that the victim witness program through the district attorney's office tries very hard to make sure that the victims are heard through that. But that's about the only program I'm aware of that deals with that. There may be others out there, but that's all I'm aware of. Do you know any more?
In regards to your first comment about that fight that occurred in the cafeteria, there were two groups of students, and it was not only the counselors but also the school liaison officer really stepped in after the fight and got down to the nitty-gritty of what caused that. That was caused by a lot of innuendos, rumors, third parties instigating people, basically all verbal, that finally just came to a head and people got physical. Once they sat down and actually confronted their grievances, they found out that a lot of them were mistruths, and what was allegedly being said about people weren't being said. That's basically why that got out of control. In regards to victims, the state of Wisconsin does have a victim, very aggressive victim compensation type program. But it's very difficult to bring victims into a setting or into a circle setting to meet their perpetrators. Victims don't necessarily want to really get involved with the perpetrators. They want their money back, they want their property back, they want to be made whole, and they don't necessarily want to be involved with people that have done that. And that is the key element. You have to have the victims willing to be able to sit down in those types of settings.
Other comment? Just relating to the second comment, we'll never accept the fact that it's safe enough. We're never going to be so good that we don't think we can get better. I want you to know that.
Other questions? Yes. No, that's fine.
My name's Terry Ritchie. I'm originally from Ladysmith area. I do receive our Ladysmith home paper, and I have to say, it doesn't just happen in Hudson School. It's all over. Ladysmith is a population of 3,800. They have problems in their school district, and I don't feel that we can pinpoint and say Hudson is not a safe community. It is. Ladysmith School District has the same problems as we have as far as the student body. with fights, it's all lack of communications, assumptions, you know what they say about assume. And also, I feel that it isn't the juveniles. We have to look at the parents. The parents are the ones who have taught these children, and they are the ones who have nurtured these children. And I am so proud of Mike for his feelings and beliefs. And I think the number one thing in our society is to respect, or the adults respect the juveniles or the young teenagers, and the teenagers will respect the adults first, back. My one question I do have is when it comes to expelling students, what are the parents' feelings? I mean, how do they feel when their child is brought in and expelled? Are they for the school district? Or are they, say no, this isn't my child, are they against what the school board has decided? Because that concerns me, because they have to learn by their mistakes. I mean, they're not going to go through their adult life getting second chances either. They have to, they commit a crime, they got to go with it, go with what, their consequences are. And I have 2 students in the high school, and I tell you, as a parent, I go through their room once a week when they're in school, and I know that they're good kids, but you just never know. And I think a lot of parents need to just, reassure themselves that, read their notes that they leave in their pockets when you're doing the laundry. You find out a lot of information when you read those notes. But my question is as far as the parents as when their child is expelled.
I'm not sure that there is an answer to that. It's situational. We expelled 2 students last Tuesday, and one parent, they didn't show up. However, there was a telephone book thick of things and interventions that the school district had done, and basically what they said is they were totally complimentary to what we've done. We'd given and given and given, and we tried, and so there was no animosity. There are other instances where it is adversarial and they don't agree about the circumstances. Once in a while, rules are there, but for everybody else's kid, but not for ours. So it just depends. It's very situational. No one likes to get to that point, because I think we all, at this point, understand the value of an education. And when we take that away, the question comes up is, does a student have a right to that? And in some cases, not when they behave in the manner that they do.
Just to add to that, in the pre-expulsion process, something that we're looking for is the parental attitude. It's not only the misconduct that caused the student to be in that process, but we have to estimate whether or not that behavior will be repeated, whether or not that student perhaps has learned a lesson already, and maybe some other interventions will take place outside of school that will make a difference. The parental attitude is important. If the parental attitude is one of understanding and a sense of responsibility, and we feel confident that the parents will take action, then it causes us to think that the prognosis is better for the student and that perhaps the student will not repeat the behavior. So we're assessing the student, but we're also assessing the parents in that process. Okay.
Thank you, Nancy. I can't help but mention the Search Institute again, and talking about parents and those predictors of highly successful young people. It was surprising to me, I suppose would have been very surprising when I was 16 or 17, to find that one of the highly correlated attributes of successful young people was having parents who set boundaries. I wouldn't have felt that way at Mike's age, but yeah, if a parent has a curfew for a child, if a parent sets boundaries and expectations and rules that shouldn't be broken, that's highly correlated with them being successful and not getting involved in juvenile delinquency and so on and so forth. So very much echoes what Nancy's saying. Do we have other questions? Yes, if there are none from anyone else, well, let's let this gentleman have his chance.
I just want to make a comment. First off, I've got an extremely strong belief in the negative effects that media play on our culture. And this comes from a background in mass communications and working in advertising for 3 years. I really get infuriated when I hear people say that things that our kids and our adults see and view in the movies and on television and the pornographic magazines and so on have no effect, because that doesn't influence behavior. And if that is true, then we've got a multi-billion-dollar advertising industry that is spending their money worthlessly. What we see and what we hear and what we as parents bring into our households and sit down and watch with our kids immediately tells our kids that it's okay. I was listening to a program called Focus on the Family, and they were talking about the effects of pornography on sex offenders. And nearly 85% of the sex offenders sitting in our jails today started out with pornography in the household when they were children. Don't tell me that these things don't affect. Our lives are bombarded by media. One of the things that I was taught in advertising is that you have to present a message 7 times in front of a person before that message truly hits home. Now you think about that. We got one flyer in the mail talking about this, and we got a nice group of people here that would probably show up regardless, just by word of mouth, because I started talking to people. One of the things that I think we have to really challenge our community and our nation as a whole is to start getting this word out. And as far as this group here tonight, and I was hoping that there'd be a game plan, I'm going to ask you folks, if there is no game plan, what are you going to do to tie in our ministerial association to get this message on the pulpits on Sundays? What are our administrators going to do as they talk to the staff in the school about respect and about treating people with dignity, really making that message brought home? And what are we as parents, and some of us as businessmen, I'm self-employed, what are we going to do when we sit down in front of the customer or sit down in front of the prospect or the client and start talking about the things that are truly important? When are we going to start opening our mouths? Because he's absolutely right. There is a very small minority that has a tremendous amount of power in this country. And it's because the rest of us sit and say nothing. Absolutely nothing. Start talking to parents. I remember when my daughter was about 14, she was invited over to a boy-girl party, and we called the parents. Well, lo and behold, the parents were not only unaware of the party, but they were going to be out of town. These parents left a 14-year-old and a 7-year-old alone by themselves for 3 days while they went out of town. Had we not called to find out what was going on, our daughter would have gone to that party. So I guess my question, getting back to this again, is what is this group going to do? What are the parents going to do? How many resources in the community are we going to pull together? How are we going to start making that positive influence? And I guess I would just like to ask, has anyone thought that far ahead yet?
Not in the immediate future. I mean, in the immediate future, not the distant. I haven't shared this with any people at my school yet. I plan to, but I was going to the end of the school year, but I forgot. The peer helper program that we have is supposed to be a program for people who are in trouble in our school to come to help for their peers, people who they're supposed to trust. But the problem is that the people on that council, the peer helper program, half of them just do it just to be on it, just to say, I'm a peer helper, and they don't do anything. There's some people that I see making fun of other students, and they're supposed to be peer helpers. That's ridiculous, and that is unexcusable. To be a peer helper, you should have to be proactive and completely into it and dedicate yourself to doing something. I want to take charge of peer helpers next year, if I may, and I want to create a preventative program before problems are created, self-esteem problems, teasing problems, harassment problems, before they're created in students so they need to come to peer helpers. I want to have forums in the auditorium, have announcements over loudspeakers from me and from other people who are my age, not administrators, to prevent those problems from arising in my high school. To prevent, and what happens in your childhood affects you psychologically for the rest of your entire life. So if we can make it so everyone's treated right now, they're going to learn to treat other people right later in life, and it's going to make society a whole lot better.
Are there any other panel members who want to respond? Nancy, I figured you would respond as president of Community Action, or somehow.
Or in the school district, too. You know, one of the reasons that I maintain an active involvement in the community is because I believe that the school cannot do it alone, you know, whatever it is. You know, we can't educate children even alone. And we must do it together. I look forward to our next strategic planning opportunity. It'll happen next year. Some of you may want to be part of that. It certainly is focused on school efforts, but 5 years ago, people like yourselves, along with us, envisioned that particular strategy on character development and creating a safe and caring learning environment. It is still a need. You know, there are still efforts to be made. Tonight's forum with the board members, the other board members of Community Action, we're wanting your comments and your questions, and we're going to go back during our next meeting and formulate our next community response. So does anyone else want to say anything? Okay. Thanks for the question anyway. Yeah, here's someone else back.
Another respondent to that question? Or another question. A good suggestion was another question. Just while we're here, the people on the Community Action Board, would they raise their hand here tonight? We have Sandy Griswold, Gay Williamson, Roy Schoberg, and our President Nancy Sweet. For those of you wondering, I'm sorry, Diane Lanphier. I'm learning how to pronounce that. And I'm Garth Christensen. I'm on the board too. You know, for those of you who are looking for ways to get involved, we're always willing to take more people into the cause. We had a question here, I think, from this lady. You might have to meet me halfway here. Yeah. Want me to hold it for you?
That's right. Okay. I've heard so many wonderful things here tonight that I'm getting all excited and shaky. It's like I'd like to respond individually because I lose track and my focus on what I, would like to respond to. But I'm not sure I'm going to formulate a very good question. I would just like to maybe echo some things that I've been fortunate enough in the 3 years I've been here to meet some very, very, I believe, outstanding young people, and it's been through my kids, bringing them home, and they frequent there quite a bit. And I hear a lot of discussion, and I'm in the middle of it many times, about some of the things, at least how they perceive of what's going on here. And I sometimes have felt a little frustrated as a parent that I'm sort of not getting the other side of it, and I don't really know where to go to hear the other side of it, of what's going on here. Because certainly I think, well, they can't have that all sorted out just right, because that doesn't sound just right. But they're certainly feeling like things are happening to us that we just really don't like. We're not being heard. And I heard that said tonight by one of the young people. And I guess I just wanted to echo his plea to somehow incorporate the young people into the process here, because I think there's a lot of really outstanding young people who have a lot of really good things to say, and we need to hear them, because that's where we're going to get control of some of the things that are going on, going bad. And part of it is to reiterate that there's too much focus on the minority, at least in their view of things, the kids that aren't the troublemakers, at least the ones I've heard from. they feel like they're getting consequences imposed upon them that are the result of a few people's choices of misbehavior. That embitters the good kids. And I guess I just maybe want to challenge more than question to how can we turn that around and start emphasizing the positive behaviors. I hear you got programs to build solid character, but we have to sort of reinforce those kids who already have the good foundation of a good character and carry some very solid good values, and reinforce them and encourage them to become the peer leaders of the rest in the school who need someone to look up to and to follow, because they have more power with their peers than even we do as adults. And yes, we have to be the first ones to set that example, but they're going to be led around and following the kids that are in these halls. And if there are people who have that ability to be popular and be the leader and are liked by all the kids, you know, whether they're the academic star or the athletic star, there are kids who cross boundaries, and they have a lot of ability and a lot of power reaching other kids who aren't feeling so wonderful about themselves. Those are the kids we need to reach, and I don't think they're always the ones that are in the peer helpers either, because there was criteria used for who gets into that group, and those aren't necessarily the kids that are getting in that group either. So, yeah, I don't have the answers.